Yeah, like that.
How you doing,
Hello.
Brian?
How you doing, man?
Getting over a cold. Do I sound terrible, guys?
Yeah,
Nah, you
Look,
sound
you're
you
not
good.
sound.
alone. You're not
I'm getting
alone.
over a cold myself, so we sound just alike in my eyes. Man, thank you so much for joining.
You're welcome, guys. I'm doing this from home. Usually I record at my office and studio, but I'm sick. It's Saturday morning, so I
Hey
hope you'll
man,
forgive me.
Love it.
we
Yeah.
appreciate it. Thank you,
Yes,
man.
thank you.
Of course.
So I wanted to ask you, did you have anything in particular that you wanted us to begin asking you, or because I know we both have, or we all have some questions, but was there
No,
anything in particular you wanted to really begin with?
no, let it rock, guys.
Okay.
Or is
Facts.
there
Well,
anything too before we get going that we should avoid talking about at all?
I'm really sick of talking about AI.
Ah,
I have no additional thoughts on
Okay.
it.
gotcha.
Everybody always wants to know how I feel about AI. I'm sick of that. So hopefully that wasn't like 97% of your
Nope.
questions.
No, 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 no,
no,
no.
Okay.
no, not at all. Let me just delete this from my phone really quick. No, I actually was not even thinking of AI. I had, we can just get into it honestly.
Hmm.
So, honestly, your work in the music business, I saw that you have a specific love for hip hop. We appreciate that. Obviously, being two hip hop senseis and a casual. I just wanted to know, where did that evolve from, and what made you really fall in love with hip hop?
Well, first of all, it's great to be the second casual on the pod. So thank you so much for having me. Um, yeah, I mean, growing up, I was attracted to it.
Hmm.
I perceived the music as art and the practitioners of said art form to be like otherworldly. And there's just as a young uh, kid growing up in the suburbs, it's just something that I was attracted to, and I sought it out. I'd go to the library and check out music. I'd go to the record store and buy music. I'd share it with my friends. I immersed myself in hip hop culture from a very early age, and it just became intertwined with life. And I'm very blessed now as a 40-year-old man to be able to work in music and help educate and inform and evangelize and help artists get discovered.
That's awesome.
Hmm.
No, that's excellent. And to double down, doing my research, I try to do things a little differently for this interview, and I saw that I know that there are two things very important to you. One being artist empowerment, and the second being artist education. Actually, I saw you retweet somebody that said how much they respect you because they refuse to keep repeating the same things over and over to certain people. And for you, I just want to take a serious moment. Like the fact that you go out your way to educate people, you've educated me quite a bit since I followed you. But like, what is it that doesn't stop you from saying, you know what, man, I'm not going to keep, tweeting the same thing? Like, you're a teacher and you educate people and you go out of your way, especially when it comes to things like contracts and how to get more fans authentically. Like, I really respect that. So, like, why is it so important to you to, educate the masses at every opportunity you get?
Great question, B. Well, first of all, it's disheartening to see so much disinformation spread like a wildfire. Everybody feels like because they have an account on a social media platform that they are somehow in the record business. And as someone who's been fortunate enough to work in music for over 20 years, I don't feel like harboring that information is helpful. And so by educating folks, the hope is that everybody has a better understanding of the inherent challenges and difficulties within this space. Everybody sees what they think is reality on social, but actual reality is it is very difficult to break into music or any entertainment form, any fine art. Even more difficult to sustain a career in any of these verticals. And the more individuals who understand that plight and the difficulties that are inherent in it, the more appreciation, hopefully, that they will have for those challenges and what it means to actually support artists. Um, in terms of background, I mean, my background in print and digital journalism, that really was the Kickstarter here. You know, we started publishing on DJ Booth educational content, over 15 years ago, and we saw that there was incredible interest in people who just wanted to learn more, and that has just been part of my ethos since then. It also is important to us because, Audiomack, which is the company that I co-founded in 2012, we aren't the biggest DSP, especially here in the United States. It's a very saturated market. And the consensus, I mean, we're all on social media. The consensus is like no one trusts, pretty much anybody in the music business, but no one trusts the streamers. Everybody thinks that, they're in it for themselves and that they don't have the best interest of the artists who are on their service at heart. And I think that it is so important as a figurehead and as a leader at my organization to break that, right? And to be front and center and to evangelize and to help educate and to amplify and to empower, because that is what we do as a company, but people don't follow companies. They tend to follow people. And so I'm just trying to spread the gospel as much as I can.
Well, I think you're doing a good job, man. An excellent
I'm trying. Thank you.
No, you're doing amazing, Brian. I'm excited right now because I'm a huge fan of Audiomack, and I can tell you, like, from the DJ booth days of blogging, I used to use Audiomack, I used to use Dat Piff, and I used to use Two Dope Boys to find all the mixtapes and stuff. So I'm extremely honored to be talking to you right now. I think the biggest thing about Audiomack that I appreciate about you guys is that you guys found a pivot in the ways that you guys distributed music, that Two Dope Boys and Dat Piff wasn't able to do, even though they were a little bit more popular than you guys back in that time. How did you guys come up with that concept and that idea to like start focusing on breaking new artists and extending the DSPs outside of the big names like the Spotifys and the Apple Musics? Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, at the at the height of the blog era, we were beginning to host artist mixtapes on DJ Booth. And that was because so many artists, hip hop artists in particular, as everyone on this podcast probably recalls, they were using file sharing services to release their mixtapes. Zippy Share, Lime Links, Mega Upload. And it was a terrible experience for everybody. For the artist, you had to worry about the link dying and then having to re-upload it. You weren't able to track your stats, so you didn't know who was actually downloading, where they were based. You weren't able to capture any email addresses. And then from the user side, it was also a horrific experience. You had to navigate through malware and pop-ups and dead links. So we saw a problem, and as is typical in business, you aim to create a solution. And so we thought that we could do that on DJ Booth, but DJ Booth from an infrastructural standpoint was never built with the intention of being both an editorial platform and a mixtape hosting site. And so that was the genesis, if you will, for the dawn of Audiomack. We broke off the concept of hosting for an entirely new platform, which was Audiomack. And the idea was don't charge artists for anything. Give them all the tools and resources, unlimited storage, unlimited uploads, the ability to track their stats on the back end. And the hope would be that that was a great alternative to Zippy Share and Lime Links and Mega Upload, and was a more functional form than live mixtapes and Dat Piff, which didn't really provide artists with much on the back end, right?
Right.
And I'd be lying to you if I said that 12 years ago, I thought that we would be where we are today with nearly 40 million monthly active users globally, the number one streaming service in most of Africa and the Caribbean 12 years ago. Because at the time, again, we just saw a problem, identified it, created a solution. But I'm really proud of the work that our team has done over that time. And I'm thrilled that we're in the position that we are now. And I hope that this is just the beginning and we could talk again in 12 years and you can ask me about other pivots.
How did, real quick, how how do I word this? How did companies and record labels stop leaking back in the day? Because I remember I'd go on Rap Godfathers, I'd see an album that's supposed to come out in 2 weeks already there, ready to go, full download and everything. Like, I just remember one day it just kind of stopped and all those links were dead. Like, what was the force that kind of stopped all of that?
So obviously, as we pivoted from the physical CD era to the digital download era to now the streaming era, fewer releases were manufactured in hard copy form. And so just by manufacturing fewer CDs, leaks were curbed. You also saw a decrease in the number of pre-release media copies that would be disseminated from the labels to writers and various other media. Like during the DJ booth years, if the label wanted us to write a review for an album and they wanted us to publish the review at the same time that the album was released, what they would do is they would send a watermarked copy, 2 to 3 weeks in advance. Yeah. Now, the watermarked copy was identified as like yours so that if it did leak, there was some way that they could trace it back to you. But yeah, I mean, they stopped doing that too. They would just send like private stream links that had an expiration date and you had to listen within like an hour. Jeez. And if you didn't, it locked. So yeah, the game has certainly changed. I mean, look, also the reality, guys, is by making it so easy to access music through streaming, all the work that people had to do to circumnavigate the internet, to find links to download these pirated versions, it made it moot, right? If you can easily access it, why am I going to take all that time and risk a virus on my laptop?
Do you think that's why more artists do surprise releases now? Or does that not really, come into effect anymore with the leaks?
I think surprise releases happen for a variety of reasons. I think sometimes there really isn't actually the intention of it being a surprise. I think it comes together really late and then they just decide to push that button. Gotcha. Right. In other instances, I think we've seen a pivot from the necessity of doing pre-release marketing when you're trying to create awareness, but the product isn't actually available for consumption, right? You want to be able to capture someone's attention and then immediately spur them to action. And so the surprise release serves that purpose, right? You didn't know this was coming in. Oh my God, it's out now. I have to press play immediately. Yeah. And then I'm going to market it after the fact.
Wow. That's so insightful. So you mentioned how you would do reviews of certain projects. I'm sure there's a fine line of, wanting to be your most honest self, but also not wanting to possibly offend certain people or certain people within labels. So like, can you kind of describe the navigation of, being that, honest version of yourself at the same time, still being respectful and understanding this is art, and people are kind of sensitive of, their babies in a way?
Well, first, let me tell you, I do not miss the days of publishing album reviews on DJ Booth. At all, for a variety of reasons. The first being, in order to put your opinion out into the world, you have to understand the level of criticism that you're going to get back, both from the fans of that artist as well as the artist, perhaps even their record label or their handlers. There were multiple times, and by multiple I mean countless, over the course of DJ Booth's days where we would receive calls, text messages, and emails from any number of people, associated with or within that artist's orbit who expressed frustration, anger, hatred toward us. One of my writers at DJ Booth, Yo Phillips, who is an incredible talent, he published a piece that was critical of Kid Cudi. And Cudi tweeted at him less than 24 hours after we published the review. And he said, you're entitled to your opinion, but just know that your words hold no weight and you mean nothing.
Whoa.
Oh,
And he was pretty distraught because he was a huge fan of Cuddy, and he was at the dawn of his own writing career, and he couldn't believe first what he said to him, but he also couldn't believe that he actually read the review, right? And I called him and I said, every time you publish something, or that we publish something of yours, you have to go in knowing that there's a very strong likelihood that the subject of your review will read it. And that's okay. And then we actually took that opportunity to publish a second piece, which was a response to Cuddy's comment about his review. So it turned into more content.
I like that.
Yeah, but yeah, the truth, guys, is it's a difficult line to walk, because you want to be respectful of someone, the time that someone took to put into their music. I feel like we did as best a job as we could. I won't say that we batted 1,000, because I don't think that that's realistic. The eye is always going to be in the beholder. And so an innocent criticism through the lens of the writer could definitely be viewed as below the belt if you were the subject of that review. But again, I'll wrap up my answer by saying what I said at the onset. I do not miss publishing reviews at all.
Could I ask real fast, was it the Speed and Bullet to Heaven album?
Well, that one was especially bad.
I was gonna say, I was like, it's gotta be that or that other. He did like a collab. It was like a rock album or something. There were two of them. And
Wizard, I think it was.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, I honestly don't remember. And interestingly enough, there were many times in my career where my daughter's making a cameo on the podcast. There were many times in my career where I would almost have a difficult time continuing to listen to that artist after the fact.
That's rough.
And no one wants that, right? But I tell people all the time, if you work in music, it fundamentally changes the way that you listen to music and you view the artist, because you find out things and you learn more about them, and you might interview them or talk to them, and you're like, this is a terrible human being. And I'm not saying that is how I felt about Cuddy, but there are moments of every day, of every week, where I'm like, I wish I was just a fan. I wish I was just a listener. I would enjoy this so much more.
I feel like we get into that pocket a lot on here. Like, you have to kind of take the fandom away from it a little bit. But honestly, I mean, we give our honest reviews and stuff. Like, this is not good, you know? Like, how much do you have to take the fandom and bias away when you do a review?
Right. Yeah, a lot. A lot. You have to try your best to completely ignore it.
That's tough. That's very tough.
So I've just been sitting here just wondering, young Z on a walk, just a nice day. I imagine probably walking through New York. Who's some of the artists that you talked about how you fell in love with hip hop? Like, who are some of those artists that really made you fall in love with the, music?
Oh man, Tribe Called Quest, Nas, Jay-Z, Biz Markie, Common when he was Common Sense. I mean, I was, if you want to label me, I was definitely one of those like backpack rapper casuals. Beastie Boys, LL Cool J. I mean, I think, I'm 40 now, so if I had a complaint about the state of commercial mainstream rap, it would probably be like the storytelling component is lesser.
Yeah.
The level of authenticity is questionable. And you don't really leave a lot of listening sessions feeling, right? Like, it's just like you heard the music, kind of just goes in one ear out the other, not much to chew on. Obviously, like, I'm painting with broad brushstrokes and generalizing here. And it is true that, and you guys are older as well. Like, as you age, you yearn for the music of yesteryear, right?
Yeah.
The music that you heard at a point likely in your life where you had more free time to just listen and not to multitask where listening was soundtracking some other important aspect of your life. And so I think it's important for that context to be stated. It's just wholly unrealistic as you age to feel the same way about any genre or art form that you did when you were younger.
Yeah. I say Gerard and I talk about that all the time. Like, there was something special back in the day about getting a physical album and you have to play it front to back.
Yeah.
And then if the album's crap, you have to sit on that for 2 years no matter
Right.
what.
Yeah, because you got to go out and buy it. Like, you have to
yeah.
take your time out to go buy the CD. You open the CD up, and now it's a weed tray because the shit is trash.
Well, I just tweeted about this the other day, right? So Corday was interviewed on The Breakfast Club, and he was asked by Charlemagne how he would respond to a YouTube video saying that his new album was a flop because it reportedly only sold a 10,000 unit equivalent.
Yeah, right.
And his response was basically like, for artists in my bracket, I think that my numbers are comparable, but like, what do these people know? And my response to that was like, people don't understand the difference between the CD era or just the physical era and the streaming era. There was a sense of urgency, meaning like if you didn't go out and get the product, you couldn't listen to it unless like your best friend went out and physically got the product.
Exactly.
And now like we're spoiled because we have infinite access to every piece of recorded music practically in history at the touch of our fingertips, available on demand. And so like people are busy. And so a new album comes out, you like the artist, you might not love them. You're like, I'll listen when I have time, but it might not happen in the first 7 days.
Yeah.
Yes.
Things changed. The game changed.
Sadly, too, we have a delete button as well, so,
I want to tap into the business a little bit more since we're talking about streaming. I know me and B had a conversation last week where we was talking about masters and stuff like that, and how initially to gain independence from the record labels, other artists will tell artists to get your masters to have complete control over your creativity and your music. Now record companies are giving you your masters, but they want a piece of everything else. I know that you deal with pushing artists forward. Have you talked specifically to artists about how they should structure their record contracts, whether they should get their masters or whether they should give up publishing? Like, have you talked to them specifically in detail about those things?
Absolutely. So we used to publish tutorials about this on DJ Booth. We would interview former record executives and entertainment attorneys and have them weigh in based on their experiences. It's hard to answer this question generally because I think it really is a artist by artist situation, right? You could have two artists and I would give potentially different guidance to each based on the kind of music they make, how old they are, how long they've been at a career in music, how patient they're willing to be, their genre, etc. So, now more than ever, you don't need a label, right? The purpose of the label back in the day was to both help you fund your career, also help you develop as an artist and put you in the right places, make the right introductions. They were the line to late night shows. They were the line to press. They were the line to commercial opportunities. And all those things still help. The difference between 15 years ago and today, though, is you can get a front page interview in the New York Times and the cover of Entertainment Weekly and a performance on Colbert. And these are all great looks, but they're not going to move the needle in a way that in this current media landscape is going to turn you from a would-be star into a superstar. We all just live in our little corners of the internet and enjoy it there. And so their power has been lessened, but what they still do have is access to resources and funding. And so my recommendation to most artists is if you don't do a deal, by default, you keep your masters and you own your publishing because you haven't given it to anyone. And you should continue to do that until the point that you've generated a substantial number of streams, revenue through merch, touring, that you have a track record of showing that you're able to generate a profit, at that point, the pendulum swings in one direction, which is that you have leverage, and you can utilize that leverage in any negotiation in order to maintain master ownership under the terms of what's called a licensing agreement, meaning you're giving the label the right to exploit your music for a set period, but you retain ownership once that period ends. As far as publishing is concerned, that's entirely different. Most ignore publishing because if streams are micropennies, publishing is micropennies of micropennies, and they think, well, there's not enough money out in the ecosystem to justify pursuing. And they would be wrong. My suggestion to all, and this is generalized advice that I would give, is register with a PRO. So that is a performing rights organization like BMI or ASCAP.
ASCAP,
okay?
yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then if you want someone to assist you with registrations and collections, you can utilize an admin, which is an administrator. Those options are Song Trust or TuneCore, or you can work with an established publisher who offers admin services. They'll help you register with the MLC, and they'll handle collections for you. This is very valuable. This money goes a long way. It helps to supplement a career.
Wow, you educate me. I'm literally sitting here taking notes. So I appreciate this knowledge. And to Gerard's point, we actually had a very great discussion, our last recording regarding Drake and Kendrick. Drew and Gerard, I'm a Drake fan through and through, by the way. Drew and Gerard mentioned they felt that Drake should have never signed with, or I'll let you guys actually state what you guys referred to last week, but you felt like his career could have went in a different direction as we see him with the lawsuits now that I want to ask you about, Z, but Drew and Gerard, kind of explain what you guys mentioned as far as what you would have liked to see from Drake.
So we all saw the phenomenon of Drake in 2009, right? I was saying that Drake was going to be Drake regardless. I didn't think he needed to sign the contract with Aspire and Young Money and Universal. I think he should have just signed it, like stayed independent himself, and then signed a deal, because I felt like a lot of his business got saturated between signing all those two people, and I feel like that's why he's in the position he is now with Universal. So I didn't think he needed to sign that record deal, and it kind of feels like how you said, like the record label will fund you money, like essentially like they keep giving Drake huge loans. Essentially that's what it feels like, and I feel like he could have avoided that if he stayed independent. And I feel like Drew can speak on his part too. I feel like Drake was getting mentored by different people telling him the same thing, and he still kept signing bigger deals with Universal, and now we are where we at now. So Drew, you can.
I was just like we were saying, he should have went the independent route a little longer, kind of like how Chance the Rapper did, and just it eventually worked out for him. But like I always thought he should have signed with a different label back then. I know Good Music back then. I thought his sound would have suited Good Music and what their vision was. I don't know. I just feel like he's in a tough spot now, and like Gerard said, he's just got to keep going on tour after tour to recoup money, and kind of like how we were talking about Michael Jackson. Like he was essentially broke, then you go on tour and make all of his money back, you know?
Yeah, I mean, given the success that he's seen, it's hard to argue that how it's played out,
right?
He go back and change much.
Yeah.
If I had to nitpick, I would say that any time that you're signing, if you sign to an artist who's already signed to another artist who has a deal with a parent label, that does tend to, chop up the pie in a lot of smaller pieces, right? Mm-hmm. At the same time, that artist he signed to, Wayne, established, signed to Birdman, established, signed to the biggest record label in the world, established, and that is in no small part what helped him get to the point where he is the most streamed artist of all time. Mm-hmm. So with that result, again, like you can nitpick, but I think hindsight, it's easy to say in 2024, he could have held out longer, he could have done this, he could have done that. The game was far different 15 years ago. Yeah. I also always tell people, being in the business of Drake or any Drake level superstar, it's expensive, guys, and it requires an immense amount of capital and an immense amount of operational resources that almost makes it impossible to do on an independent level, right? You have all of these people who work in these buildings, and people are like, well, what is the label doing for them? Well, the label provides, bookkeeping and clearances and operations and production, A&R administration, and like all these small little jobs that maybe individually you could reassign to someone else, but collectively really allow for an artist to get to that size and thrive. So the good music thing is interesting because obviously the influence of Kanye early in his career suggests that would have been appropriate. But like you also look at the track record of good music, and there's only a few of consequence, and that whole thing basically has blown up and gone away now. So hard to say that he made the wrong decisions.
I do want to ask you, as a fan and with your knowledge of the business, how do you view the overall beef between Drake and Kendrick? And then now that you see the lawsuits, I'm curious, you always see the jokes on social media and the thought process of Drake being a sore loser, but like, would you be able to kind of expand on what that lawsuit actually is Drake indicating and what you see a possible outcome of that once everything is said and done?
Yeah, so, for clarity's sake, we're not at the lawsuit phase yet. These are petitions that were filed, which are a precursor for the potential for lawsuits to be filed. I have my doubts that it's even going to get that far. The response that we've seen thus far suggests that, I don't want to say that they're meritless, but there might not be enough meat on the bone to take this to that next level. As far as this ongoing spat between Drake and Kendrick, I think for the most part, up until this past summer, it's been good for business for both of them and for their parent label, which is Universal Music Group, Drake through Republic and Kendrick through Interscope. I think the conversation online tends to be like the be-all, end-all. And if I've learned anything over 20 years, it is that while there is a mirroring effect, what we see online does in some ways take form offline. I think it's also good to remind everyone that like social media isn't entirely the real world, and that if you went only by social media, you'd think like Drake's career is over, and it's not. He's going to be just fine. He needs to do one of two things, in my opinion, one of which I know he's not going to do because it's not in his DNA. Option number one is go away for a while, bro.
Man.
Just like go away, make people miss you. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. And then when you return, even if you drop some mid, it's going to be interpreted as the best thing ever because it's been so long since we've heard you. Yeah. So that's option number one. And again, we all know he's not going to take that because that's not Drake.
Right.
Option number two is like drop some fire. Right. It's easy for me to say that. I don't make music. But like Drake is undoubtedly one of the best songwriters of the modern era. That's not a skill that just like overnight went away because he lost the beef with Kendrick. Right. So the next best thing outside of making people miss him to put him back into good graces is a hit record. It's a hit record. That is what will change the conversation. And I should point out, a hit record that does not reference, allude to, or directly speak to Kendrick Lamar. Right. That needs to just be swept under the rug.
Yeah, because it's going to keep coming back. Yeah. So.
Do you think that's realistic though, for him to be able to, knowing Drake, like you said, like the best thing for him to do, take a break. And by the way, we all laugh because we talk about this consistently, and both Drew and Gerard always tell me like he needs to just take a hiatus. I'm like, guys, it's not happening. Like it should ideally, but with Drake, I just don't see, knowing how hip hop is, can he actually drop something and not allude to, subliminal shot, Kendrick, like they both have been doing it for over 10 years. So to say that's what he should do, do you think that's realistic for him to be able
Yeah.
to do so?
Yeah, I do think it's realistic. Look, I don't know his team well, right? I don't know his inner circle well. I am friendly with some people who work for his record label, OVO Sound, and I think that they're wonderful. But, what he probably needs is he probably needs someone in his ear that he will listen to that will give him some recommendations for how to move past this. The actions of the past 8 months or so suggests to me that there's like really nobody who really has Drake's best interests at heart, which tends to happen, right? Where once you're like once you enter into that circle, right? You don't want to be banished,
Right.
and so you might not be as truthful with the artist as you need to be because you are fearing retribution. In this case, it would be getting kicked out of that inner circle. So yeah, what would be best for him is someone to be like, hey man, go on vacation for 6 months. Or what would be best would be like, hey, let's write the best record of your career. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Love talking about Drake, Kendrick beef. I actually have a random question I want to ask you. Probably haven't been asked something like this in quite a while. When you look at the career of a person named MC Hammer, who most people know, you guys are funny. You get the jokes, you talk about how he lost money and all that, but like also when you really do your research, you know that he actually was a guy that was about that life. He just actually happened to dance. He was one of the people that Suge Knight didn't want any problems with. He put, allegedly he was a person you didn't want to disrespect. Whether it's Redman saying how he let him know talking about his mother isn't something that needed to happen, but like I just feel like MC Hammer, we've talked about on the podcast before, but he's one of those people that will never get the credit they truly deserve. So with you, discussing some of the people you fell in love with hip-hop, how do you view the career of MC Hammer, and do you agree that he will ever get or has ever gotten the just due he truly deserves?
No. And his post-career headlines, I believe he went bankrupt. That has tended to shade what was accomplished before that happened. And as we've seen, it's with social media especially, the narrative is constantly being rewritten based on whatever the current talking points are, which tends to bury a lot of individuals' greatest accomplishments. What would help him would probably be a documentary that highlights his influence. Recently there was a documentary that was published. I'm veering right here, so work with me. There was a documentary that was released on Netflix on Elvis. Okay. And I'm not saying that this documentary by itself has changed the narrative that Elvis took black art and whitewashed it, right? But what it did do was it highlighted that him growing up in Memphis, he was taken by black music, by gospel music, by blues, and he loved it from a very early age. This is before the industry ever got a hold of him. And authentically, he really did gravitate to the music he ended up making and succeeding with. And anyone who's watched this documentary, who I've talked to, has said this completely changed my view of Elvis, right? Because he really loved it. And they even interviewed people from Memphis who said he used to peer into black churches and watch the choir on Sunday mornings. That is how intimately invested he was in the consumption of this art form, right? And I think
Becky Wilson for sure.
I think Hammer and several other luminaries from the late 80s and early 90s would deeply benefit from renewed storytelling that highlights the impact and the respect that they garnered in the business. I think when it comes down to it, though, at the time at least, rappers who danced were viewed differently than those who didn't, right? I mean, like, people might not remember this, but like even LL Cool J was clowned because he always took his shirt off, right?
Yeah.
LL Cool J was Drake before Drake, guys, right?
Gerard just said that.
Z, we literally, there's been like at least our last 3 episodes, we've been talking about certain things, and you are literally confirming or giving us like kudos. We always joke about how we are media, and I like to hang on to that, but like, you are doing so much for us because literally just last week we were discussing, and Gerard was saying how much Drake is truly this generation's LL Cool J. And I was actually, my follow-up question was going to be LL Cool J, so I'll let you continue. Sorry, but you are doing us some
Oh
justice.
no,
Thank
no,
you.
no. Please ask the next question.
No, so to your point, LL Cool J recently said when it comes to hip hop, he is the most important artist there is.
That's a
You know,
fact.
and from afar you may hear that, and if you weren't around during those days, it's like, come on, LL Cool J, well, he's the actor, like, a lot of people that are within the hip hop world now don't even realize what he did. So could you kind of elaborate on LL Cool J and how he does relate to today's Drake?
Sure. I think fans like the idea that an artist is one thing, right? That's comfortable, that's familiar, right? And LL Cool J was as versatile an artist as it got, right? LL could do a hard record. Cool J could do a ladies record. He could do a party record, and that broke a lot of people's brains. Like that still breaks people's brains, right? The idea that an artist isn't just one thing. He absolutely has his DNA on the blueprint of modern hip hop, right? The ability to play to multiple crowds authentically. It never came off, at least to me, through these casual ears. It never came off to me as manufactured or contrived. And he's right. Like, he was a pioneer at the pioneering modern day commercial hip hop label, which sadly is no more at this point.
Yeah.
And all of the greatest success stories, whether they be East Coast based artists or commercial success stories across the country, you could point back to LL Cool J. And I think his like "I'm the greatest of all time" claims, beyond being a callback to an album title of his, are more than appropriate. I mean, between his work with the Rock the Bells Festival and his Sirius XM channel, I'm happy to see that there are items in place that at the very least serve as constant reminders to all of us of that influence. But again, like, there's no shame in telling people, because if you don't, they'll forget.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a documentary for MC Hammer. We were just talking, like, if LL Cool J decided to do a TV show or a movie, you almost wouldn't believe half the stuff that would be within that movie because it seems like no one man could accomplish so much, but yet he has. And
I
I'm
mean,
glad we're in a space where we can go
he
ahead,
started
John.
when he was 16 years old. You know what I'm saying? And to span to the career he is now, I think he's 55, 56 years old. Like, that's a 40-year career. Like, you have to give him that credit. And I think it's because of his pivot, like Brian said, to something else. And like you said, B, that people like forget that his career that he started and was the foundation of was hip hop. And then, like, we talk about Def Jam with such reverence, like, because it was the like prototypical hip hop label, it was the foundational label. That Def Jam wouldn't have existed without LL Cool J. Period. Like, no Beastie Boys, like Run DMC wasn't even signed to Def Jam. So like, that's not like, that's yeah, and they always give them that credit, but it was LL Cool J. So like, yes, when he said he's the most important piece, Jay-Z's idol before he became Jay-Z was LL Cool J. Like, so like, he has absolutely all the right in the world to say I'm the most important piece, because he is. That's a fact. Like, so
100%. Brian, I want to ask you, as you give this knowledge and as you share, this great advice for people, Do you find yourself encountering, because you are white, that your word may not go as far as a person who literally would say everything that you have, but just would happen to also be black at the same time?
So yeah, the right message, wrong messenger
Right.
issue. Yeah.
Thank you. I was trying to think of how
It's a good
how to
question, though.
phrase
Parties
that.
must be crazy. Somebody else is saying, you're like, I literally just said that.
That, you know what, first of all, I've done a lot of pods. That's a great question. No one's ever asked me that question before. Yeah, I get it all the time. And I get it. I totally understand it. I think it's valid. To that, I would say anyone who's ever met me, anyone who's ever worked with me, anyone who knows me knows my intention, and they know my heart, and they know what I believe and who I believe in, and that's what matters, right? People who work in the business never criticize me. It's fans of artists who see a white profile picture. They don't know me. They never read DJ Booth. They never listened to any of the interviews that I did back in the day. They don't use Audiomack. And so they don't know. And they form a snap judgment based on these things. And that's fine. My hope would be that you continue to follow me, or, look back to see what I've done. And over time, perhaps change your mind. But I can't control for that. And I'm cognizant that there are a lot of people who look exactly like me who are horrible, terrible, awful human beings who have historically taken advantage primarily of young black kids. And so, that's an uphill fight that I cannot win on my own.
I got a
100%.
question about that though. So we're talking about that, and we've also talked on our podcast about gatekeeping and stuff. So do you because I can tell you are immersed in the culture of hip hop. When you see other artists come in and use hip hop as a stepping stone to go to other places, how does that make you feel? What do you see from that?
Good question.
It's maddening. It's frustrating. I do think, when you talk about the Post Malones or the Jelly Rolls or the MGKs or any of these white artists who have seen most of their success in the culture and in a primarily black art form, I think a lot of them entered into the industry at an age where they were very easily manipulated by people who had bigger plans for them.
Right.
And as adults, you could make the argument you are in control of you. You are the artist. It's like your name is on the door, so to speak. And so ultimately, while someone else might have been pulling the strings, at the end of the day, your name, your image, your reputation. That said, I know plenty of artists who got involved in music for the right reasons and who are absolutely led astray. And we're told that this is the type of music that you should be making, and these are the type of records that you should be writing, and these are the artists who you should be collaborating with. And that wasn't who they really were. Okay. And then once they achieved some measure of success, that is what finally unlocked the ability for them to make the music that they actually wanted to make all along, because they had enough cachet and gravitas to do that, where you didn't have some record executive telling them, I'm not going to put out your album unless it sounds like this thing. So I'm not completely letting them off the hook, but I am saying that there are a lot of terrible, bad actors who have manipulated young artists into thinking that their greatest path to success is by making hip hop music. And a lot of what you're seeing, second, third, fourth chapters of their career, if they're fortunate enough to get that far, is what they actually wanted to do all along.
Okay.
To piggyback off that a little bit, how do you feel? I don't want to single out Jelly Roll in particular, but how do you feel about country kind of breaking into hip hop now? So it's more and more we're seeing it, especially with Lil Durk and Morgan Wallen. Will they do 3 tracks now? And after one, I thought that was enough, but now it just seems like they're kind of milking it. I mean,
I don't need it. I don't need to hear any more Lil Durk, Morgan
Exactly.
Wallen.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And they got some heat. I can't lie to you.
Come on,
I
B.
personally enjoy some of that combination.
So growing up, I was the kid who, when someone said, "What do you listen to?" I would say, "I love hip hop, but pretty much I listen to everything but country." That's what I would tell people
Yeah.
growing up. But that's because legacy country is not what's currently being made.
Right.
What's currently being made is country music that is being produced by even hip hop producers with hip hop drums and rhythm. Right. It's countrified pop.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not our
with hip
parents'
hop
country
elements
that we grew up hearing.
Absolutely. I could tell you, Audiomack, since its inception, has been synonymous with hip hop, but our biggest genres are also R&B, Latin, Caribbean, and African music. And over the last year, country/folk is one of the 5 fastest growing genres on Audiomack, alongside Amapiano, Arabic, what else? Gospel, and electronic. And I think there's a few reasons for that. One, some historically older skewing genres like country, folk, and gospel are getting younger. The people who are making them are younger, and the audience is more technologically savvy. And so, like, whereas they used to buy physical copies, which was great for country music artists because more money to be made. That audience has gotten younger. And then obviously you mentioned like the crossover in the production and the appeal. I've found a liking to it. I won't say that it's like my top genre, but like I'll rock with some Zach Bryan. I like Zach Bryan a lot. He reminds me a little bit of Johnny Cash. I'll dabble. But again, like I'm not going to come on your podcast and be like, I'm a country music expert, because like if you were to ask me some country music trivia, I would undoubtedly fail.
Fair enough.
So, Z, I see you give advice to artists that are starting off, like how you would go about, beginning their careers. One thing I wanted to ask you, with us doing a podcast, and you see the podcast world, especially over COVID, like really booming, do you have any advice to anybody out there that, for us, for instance, like we've been doing a podcast, and we're quite consistent with it. However, like a lot of the podcasts you see really blowing up already have people that are, part of that A-list, celebrity tier. So all they have to do is get their friends come on the show and people want to see that. Say you're not one of those people. You're really trying to get, from the ground. What advice do you have to people out there podcasting to like really, make something out of their content or, kind of go to that next level?
Well, first of all, 52 minutes into this conversation, I'll praise you guys. The nature of the conversation is very conversational, right? Which I think really lends itself to long-term engagement, right? Most people want to feel like they're just listening to people having a conversation, and it's not back and forth interview, right? Which tends to be a bit more awkward. So I think the way that you structure your podcast and the way that you're approaching it, that is assuming that like this conversation mirrors the one that you're having with other people and with one another. From a content strategy perspective, like you're headed in the right direction. I think just like the same advice that I give artists, the difficulty here is there's just so many options that are available on demand where you're competing for people's free time. And for the most part, people have 8 hours that they're either in school or at work, and 8 hours roughly that they're sleeping, which leaves 8 hours to consume while handling the rest of life's responsibilities. And when you're talking about how to spend that time, you're competing as a podcast with video games and on-demand film and music and audiobooks and social media and politics and pornography and you name it, right? And that's challenging. I wish I had a better answer because I'm sure that's what you were looking for. And also, I wish I had a better answer because then I would write a book and I'd make a lot of money. But yeah, I think the advice that I gave in that core day tweet was quality, consistency, and catalog. So, continuing to do what you're doing where people can expect it, same place, same time, so the Batman thing. And then you build up this catalog that over time suggests resonance and stickiness.
No, I appreciate that. And, we have people that have been telling us, like, hey, you guys were in our, top podcast listened to for the year. And it's like, you just broke down. There's so many other things people can take the time out of their day to listen to and enjoy. So we don't take for granted. We always thank people that, take the little time out of their day just to give us a listen. Like, it truly means a lot, and it hasn't gotten old to this day. So, and with you, like, we appreciate you. We know you're very busy. And you this was a lesson to me, because when I first reached out, you let me know, hey, I can't right now, but reach out later, and we'll see what we can do. So I didn't take that as like a negative thing. It was like, okay, not right now, but timing is everything. Like, I feel like for you to come on our show now, it worked out perfectly to where we were able to talk about the lawsuits. We were able to talk about certain things that hadn't even been in fruition yet, when I reached out. So thank you, for one, for even taking the time to respond to my email, and two, like, really sticking to your word and being able to do this for us, 57 minutes. I can't say enough how much we appreciate you tremendously.
Yeah.
Yes,
You're welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I really do appreciate that.
And
I feel
also,
like that's
if
a great
Audiomack
segue,
is
B.
looking to host a podcast, you have our information. You can just call
Yeah,
us.
we I was actually going to ask, does Audiomack house podcast?
We do. You can create an account and designate it as a podcast account, and we have the ability to connect an RSS feed. I'll be frank, guys. We saw what Spotify tried to do a few years ago. They bought up podcast networks. They bought shows, and they tried to pivot a music streaming service into an audio streaming platform, right? And the rationale there is that it's very expensive to run a music streaming service, right? You have licensing agreements with rights holders, you're paying royalties, whereas with podcasts, if you're acquiring them, you're paying an upfront, and then there's no royalties, right? And so it helps with your bottom line. It helps balance your balance sheet. It makes the profit and loss statement at the end of the year look a little bit better. But what it ends up doing is it muddies the user experience, right? Because in the same app experience, all artists are now competing with non-artists, audiobooks, podcasts, etc. We saw that, and we were almost repelled by it, right? We thought, is there a lane for us to produce educational podcast content that would supplement the user experience? If so, we'd be interested in that. But watering down the experience where people we know are coming specifically to listen to music, and then front and center would be greeted with podcast content, we thought that was unfair. And so we learned the lesson Spotify has subsequently learned, which was, for the most part, that investment was a failure. And not interested in going down that same road.
You know who has been successful though? Like iHeart has been successful with doing it because they already have radio, so it's kind of in the same vein. But that's the only company I've seen that they did the same thing with artists, like give people the ability to start podcast companies. They bought those companies and they hosted on iHeartRadio, the apps and stuff, but you can hear it anywhere with the RSS feed. But they still continue that, like they still move forward and it's successful. Like, is it because they already a radio company and it's similar, like that they're successful?
Yeah, and successful in that they took what they were already doing and were able to repurpose it through what is a very popular behavior, which is to listen to podcasts. And so that was just a natural evolution for them. But I can tell you, in terms of consumption, the Audiomack app is more popular in the United States than the iHeartRadio app.
Talk your shit, B,
So I'm just saying. We're also more popular. We're also more popular than Pandora,
Let 'em know.
Tidal, and I could go on.
Keep talking, yeah.
No, that's I really have come away from this interview amazed by how humble you are, but also your intelligence, man. It's just on another level. We really had been itching to be able to talk to someone about contracts, because hip hop, one of the pillars is money. I got this much money, blah blah blah. But it's like, it's almost hard to feel bad for these artists sometimes when they talk about, they gloat and throw this money in your face, but then it's like, actually my label was not doing, the best by me. So we always talk about, or we've talked about in the past certain episodes, some of the best labels to sign to, some of the worst. What advice do you have out there? And I know, you say it on Twitter all the time, but like these artists, you're essentially getting front loaded this money to pay back. And we kind of figured that out. But like, what are some things you should look for as far as like signing a good contract versus a bad contract as upcoming artists, continue to stay independent more and, go that route? So curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, I would tell an artist, you want to take the most possible money up front for the shortest absolute term. So like, you're going to give me the most money and I have to deliver the least amount of product, right? Which will allow me to renegotiate, get out of that deal and get into a better one. Now I would say you want to guarantee yourself the opportunity to retain ownership of your masters long term. You want to have creative control, both over your art, but also over how your marketing budget is executed, right? So when an artist signs, they'll typically get an upfront advance, which is an advance on your royalties. They will be given the opportunity to take a marketing budget, and some will be offered a recording budget. I think the trap is accepting all of it when you don't actually need it, and that the more money you take up front is the more money you have to recoup. And so if, let's say, you have up to that point been recording at home in a studio that you've created, either freely or as close to zero as possible, right? Because the costs have already been recouped. Don't take the recording budget. You don't need to record in a high-end studio in a big market where they're going to overbill you just to feel like a success story. Because again, it's not free. You're paying for it out of your coffer. And then as far as the marketing budget is concerned, what a lot of labels are doing right now is they're actually hiring independent digital marketing agencies outside of the record label system, and they are running the campaigns. Now, why does this matter? If the people inside the record label are running the campaign, their time is covered by their employer, okay? But if you're paying someone on the outside, you're paying them separately. And so the marketing budget then doesn't go as far because part of it is just paying the people to do the work. And then they're taking that money and allocating it for digital ad spend and content capture and et cetera. So you want to make sure, like, are you doing the work? Are you hiring an outside source to do the work? If you're hiring an outside source to do the work, who are you working with? What artists have they worked with? What type of campaigns have they run? What have you seen that they've done that has been successful? This is called in any business due diligence. You want to make sure that who's doing the work and how they're spending the money aligns with what you think makes sense for your career. And then, of course, and this is what they get you, have your own independent entertainment attorney review everything. Typically the label will say, like, we'll cover your legal costs, and they'll introduce you to a lawyer. But that's the same lawyer that works with them. Who do you think that lawyer is going to be looking out for? You or the label? They're not going to be looking out for you. So bring your own label entertainment attorney to the table. That way they are an independent third party that really truly has your best interests at heart.
Great advice.
And I know you probably thought I was kidding, but I've been literally taking these notes. So just know
he's about to drop an album soon.
I'm picking up what you put down.
He's about to start a record label, right?
Yeah, exactly.
This is incredible information. Like the fact that you do this, and there's no reason for you to do what you do at the end of the day. Like, you go out of your way to really help people, whether they choose to take it or not. Like, I think that's as selfless as it gets. So why not take these notes? Like, I'm being educated so much, man. This is great. Like, thank you. A long time ago, I literally was at a party, and Drew and Gerard know so much when it comes to hip hop. I just was listening to them talk, and I'm like, man, I feel like people would love to hear these kind of conversations. And that's what ultimately, started this idea. So as the casual of the show, and I was talking about it last week, hip hop can be so intimidating for you to admit, like, I don't actually know these things. So with them both having I mean, their knowledge when it comes to hip hop is just bounds and bounds over the average person. So, what my ultimate goal has always been is for people to listen to us and be like, it's okay not to know these things, not to know all the albums, but to admit, hey, I want to, get to know these things. So, I'll always be that person. I'm willing to take that L and be the dumb one and be like, hey, I don't know these things. So, man, this is a very important episode to me, and I don't think you can understand why that is.
It's so funny that you say this. I just had a very similar conversation the other day. So I have an 8-year-old daughter. She made a cameo on the pod earlier, and she asked me a question, and I absolutely could have made up some BS just to give her an answer. And I said to her, I go, honestly, like I have no idea. Let's look it up together. And it reminded me of when I was a kid. I felt like any time I ever had a question, my parents answered it. Mm-hmm. And looking back now as a parent myself, I know that wasn't possible. They absolutely were lying to me. And the lesson that I learned through that is, and I love them. The lesson that I learned through that is like it's okay to say I don't know, right? And then to desire to find out. And I think the world would be, not to get all sentimental here, I think the world would be a better place if more people were more comfortable with just saying, I don't know, or I don't have an opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at social media. It's almost not to blame all of our world problems on social media, but, it's almost like people will go out of their way to pretend to know something than just say, no, I really don't know, to be honest with you, but, like, I can find out rather than just bullshitting you, to be honest, or lying. It's like, bro, that's not the truth. Like, right. Why lie? But that's the world we live in, unfortunately.
Yeah, look, there's different pockets of Twitter, and like one of them that I find quite entertaining is what's called like medical Twitter, right? Where you have like nurses and doctors.
Yeah.
And like I'm a WebMD scholar. I can use Google, but I know nothing. Right. And so I would never jump into medical Twitter and argue with a doctor about what they're talking about, because that's just not my lane. Yeah. And it always gets me where I can be breaking down something in the music business and, one of Nicki Minaj's fans jumps into my mentions. And it's like you're a fan, like just fan. You don't have to be an expert in the record business because like your idol makes music. That's not how this works.
Right.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. Well, we always ask people when they come onto the show, man, your Mount Rushmore. It's time. I know you've named the artists that you grew up loving, but you got to let us know your 4 artists you will have on your Mount Rushmore. And again, just 4. No, you can have honorable mentions, but at the end of the day, it's just 4 heads that's going to be on this Mount Rushmore. So, see, we want to ask you, you're given 4 people to put on your hip-hop Mount Rushmore. Who are those 4 people?
Damn.
Hardest question you've ever been asked.
No, I could do it. I'm fairly confident I can do it. All right, so we're gonna go Hove, Nas,
Let's do
Pac, and I guarantee you never would have guessed my 4th. I'm gonna go E40.
Wow.
What?
Wow. All right.
Oh, man.
Just tell us that. I have a lot of respect.
That 4th one is always a curveball.
Yeah, no. You gotta give us some insight into your 4th. That's an amazing list, by the way.
Wait, we're talking. Where you from?
Chicago.
No, you have to explain E40.
Nope. Yeah. Not from the Bay.
Okay, so first of all, what a lot of people don't understand about Chicago is, obviously we had Crucial Conflict, Do or Die, Common Sense, right? So there's no shortage of legendary Chicago Twista, no shortage of legendary hip hop practitioners from the great state of Illinois. That said, being in the Midwest, we always found that the most successful rap artists borrowed elements from everywhere else, right? Chicago hip hop has always been influenced by both coasts, right? And so I was never someone who, just because I grew up here, only solely listened to either Chicago artists and or East Coast artists. The reason why I say E40 is because this man literally created a new language, right?
That's true.
And candidly, growing up, I had no clue what he was saying, but I
I
was,
still don't. I still don't.
but
Most people don't. Most people don't.
Yeah.
but I was so enamored and I was so entertained, and also because Too Short was so flippin' raunchy that my father told me that I couldn't listen to him. E40 was like the more tolerable version, you know. And I'm like a Pac historian. I've read every book there is to read about him, and obviously the influence of the Bay Area on his career and on his life. You know, I found out a great deal about you know, the legends from the Bay. So yeah, those would be my four. I mean, like if you asked me the same question like a year ago or 2 years ago, you know, it'd probably be different. At one point, I probably would have said Kanye, but I can't in good conscience anymore. But yeah, those are my four.
I love
That's
that.
fire. That's
Yes.
fire.
We've had a
That
lot of
was
people
dope.
give us the Mount Rushmore. I'm not gonna lie,
Yeah.
that it's hard to top that one.
Yeah.
That
No, that
E40,
was.
especially because I feel like E40 is almost this chameleon, right? Where like people forget he was around during Biggie and Pac, like you said. Matter of fact, there was a situation to choose on what you believe, where Biggie had to make a call because you know E40 had guys that was about to do some things and didn't want it to escalate, but like he's still, I mean, front center at the Warriors games. He's got what I think wine now.
Yeah.
He's been married. Talks about like you know having a successful marriage for a long time. So been in movies. Three Strikes, one of my favorites. So like he's done so much. Arguably, like right behind Snoop, but you just never see his name in that same regard, despite him literally doing almost just as much. So I'm very impressed that you put him on
No,
that.
that was
list.
that was impressive. I love
That's
that.
definitely
I
impressive.
didn't
So
notice any Wu-Tang love. So where did they go for you?
I mean, I think I probably enjoy the work of some individuals in Wu-Tang more than necessarily the collective in terms of their catalog. Love Meth, Love Ray, RZA's influence undeniable, ODB, limited solo catalog for obvious reasons. Yeah, I mean, like, Wu-Tang's great. I mean, like, you gave me 4 slots. What
yeah,
are we
we're
gonna
four.
I'm just saying.
like
I was just
100 of
thinking,
them.
like we had one guy on here before who put all of Wu-Tang as one of their slots, so that's why I asked.
And sidebar, when I was doing college radio back in the day, one of the best interviews I ever did was with You God.
Wow.
He had me on the phone for like 3 hours,
Jeez.
and I told him before we started the interview, I was like, "We're gonna pre-record this. Like this is gonna be like a maximum 7 to 10 minute segment." And he basically told me every story ever.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, good dude. Good times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
awesome.
Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I mean, this has been such a great discussion.
Yeah.
I want to give you a chance, Brian, to let the people know where they can find you. I know you've mentioned Audiomack, just your Twitter, how they can really get to know more about you and what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Well, thank you for letting me plug myself here.
Yeah.
Most important thing for all of your listeners is if you are unfamiliar with Audiomack, get familiar. Our app is available on iOS and on Android. It is free to download and it is free to use. It is a freemium model, meaning you pay through watching and reading ads if you don't want to subscribe. And if you do want to subscribe, it's only half the price point of Spotify and Apple Music, $6.99 monthly here in the US and Canada. We believe what we are doing in this space is unique and different from our competitors. We've put a great deal of emphasis on localization and human curation, which are elements that have been completely stripped away from the user experience across the DSP landscape. And so download the app, take a spin, leave some feedback for me. You can do that either on social media. I am Brian Zisook, BrianZisook on Instagram and on Twitter, or via email, z@audiomack.com. Thank you guys so much for inviting a second casual to the pod. I deeply appreciate the invitation, as well as the thoughtfulness of your questions. And I wish all of you a happy, healthy holiday season and New Year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Man.
Thank
Same
you.
to you tremendously. And hopefully we can get you on here again because
Yeah.
I mean it felt like we've known each other for quite a while, and like you said, the conversation was something I truly appreciate. So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and during your holiday season, as I know you have a daughter that probably wants to go shopping right now as we speak. So man, we appreciate you, brother, for real.
That's actually exactly what I'm doing this afternoon.
Yeah.
Brian, real fast before you get out of here, I'm always curious what kids are listening to. So, like, what is your daughter into right now?
She's into whatever I play for her, which
Fair
is
enough.
Good
which,
dad.
which
Good
is
father,
Good
good
dad.
father.
That's
yeah.
a good dad. Right.
yeah, which is great. Two artists in particular that she's really taken a liking to that I've introduced. One is Burna Boy, incredibly
right.
talented Afrobeats artist
Yeah.
from Nigeria, and then the other is Teddy Swims, who
Oh,
is
wow. There you go, babe.
incredibly soulful R&B singer from Georgia. So those are two of her faves.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's
And
two
maybe
dope
some
artists.
E40
yeah.
here and there, too, huh?
Eventually, I don't know yet. Yeah, but thank you guys.
Thank you,
I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks,
Happy
dude.
holidays.
Happy
Appreciate
holidays.
you,
Take
man.
care.
Bye bye.
Oh, man.
Man, that was fire.
Wow.
That was fire.
Hands down might be my favorite interview we've done.
Yeah.
There's no might in my
It's just
man.
like
That was-
he
that was
answered
such a-
so many questions and stamped so many things we've talked about on here.
Man.
Like, everything's coming
Nah,
full
yeah,
circle.
that really just made me feel good about us. We doing
Yeah.
the right thing because, like, he really
Keep grinding.
everything we've been saying, everything we've been doing for these past couple years, he really just like solidified all that shit. And he been working in the music industry for 20 years,
Yeah.
so we
Yeah.
doing the right thing, fellas. So